that all sort of together in this graph 3, which kind of is trying to encapsulate pretty much all the points I've made thus far, which is, in this case now we have real GDP growth on the x-axis and cumulative inflation on the y-axis. And here you see the US is an outlier. We've talked about that's what the t-shirt graph shows. And yet we're in the middle of the pack when it comes to cumulative inflation. Inflation was very much a global phenomenon where we are an outlier vis-a-vis other advanced economies. It's not on inflation, it's on growth. I think those points have been underappreciated in the inflation debate, so I hope that I hope that we can amplify those points. I'm getting interested in how I'm going to skip this. Okay, I'll get to this in a minute. So now I want to speak about the report itself. And what I want to do here is actually go to the report suggestion box, the survey suggestion box. Everything you see here is pulled right out of the report. Each one of these are friendly suggestions for things we ought to do to achieve some of the goals that both Ben and Matthias talked about, full employment. So we've been sustaining something like a full employment economy, labor market in the U.S. for, oh, we got some water up here, but I don't see it. Oh, it's over there. Okay, I'll get that there. We've had a full employment economy for much of the past couple of years. And when you have an economy like ours, where consumer spending is 70% of GDP, it's more like 55% in Europe and more like 40% in China, simply sustaining full employment tends to be a pretty important driver of steady and pretty stable growth. Sorry, there's I want to point out this line. It's from a new publication by a Goldman Sachs research group. And they kind of look at it from the other side of the equation. So they asked with the graph on the right, what would be the effect on consumer spending of a 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate by quintile? And what you see is that consumer spending would be dinged most forcefully at the lower end and less so at the top. Flip that around and think about the impact of that of this sustained low unemployment rate where we've seen strong wage growth, particularly at the middle and the bottom, and its impact on consumer spending has been strong and steady. The graph on the right speaks more to asset prices. But there are other factors that might be in play here as well. So consumer spending, this is when we talk about the middle out, bottom up growth. That's what that Goldman Sachs slide is talking about, how in a 70% consumer spending economy with larger multipliers at the lower end, if you have that kind of job market generating this kind of wage results, not only do you see some wage compression, which is very welcome, but it supports aggregate consumer spending. Of course, excess savings has been an important part of the mix here, and folks at the fiscal group here have done nice work on that, documenting the importance of excess savings. I think those have largely burned off for the bottom half, but they've been important. In our chapter on the benefits of full employment, we think about whether there's a productivity multiplier at full employment. This is all quite theoretical. I think it would be a mistake to assert it too firmly, but it kind of makes sense. If firms are trying to maintain unit profits when labor costs are going up, they have an incentive to boost productivity in order to maintain their margins. Now, classical economists would say, well, any firm that isn't optimizing its productivity, maximizing its productivity, should be out of the economy. But that's not really how it works. And so, various people have speculated that perhaps there's a full employment productivity multiplier in the spirit that I said. You just have more incentive to find efficiencies in a high-pressure labor market. I think that's probably true, but I've never seen super compelling evidence for it. However, there's been some work recently on the increase in job reallocation rates, and this is the idea of people upgrading in a really tight labor market, going across the street to get a better job. In some ways, that may have improved some of the fit and the productivity, certainly lowering search costs. And there's been some nice work on what the survey calls high-propensity business applications. That is, we've seen some really strong business applications, historically strong, and Decker and Haltermanger did a study. These are very rigorous researchers who don't say things about productivity unless they think they have something to say, and they point out that factors that were kind of working the other way may have contributed to the decline in dynamism and entrepreneurship. So the pandemic-era pattern of business formation may have implications for how productivity evolves going forward. And this is saying that perhaps full employment, increased job reallocation does have a positive productivity effect. I offer those as somewhat speculative, but I think important potential benefits of full employment and costs of not being at full employment. But of course, we can't talk about our growth record without talking about inflation, which has also been obviously a very important factor in what we've seen. And here I have a couple of other slides that you may or may not have seen, and I think they're important. Remember the first slide. Let's do the triumvirate here. So the three slides show, first, we had stronger fiscal policy and stronger growth. Okay, that's kind of commonsensical, I hope. Secondly, well, okay, but did you have more inflation? Same variable on the x-axis, stronger, it's the same fiscal support variable on the x-axis, but this time the y-axis is cumulative core inflation. And here you see more of a random scatter plot. We're up there on the fiscal support, as I already showed you, but we're kind of in with the rest of the pack on cumulative inflation. So let's put that all sort of together in this graph 3, which kind of is trying to encapsulate pretty much all the points I've made thus far, which is, in this case now we have real GDP growth on the x-axis and cumulative inflation on the y-axis. And here you see the US is an outlier. We talked about that's what the t-shirt graph shows. And yet we're in the middle of the pack when it comes to cumulative inflation. Inflation was very much a global phenomenon where we are an outlier vis-a-vis other advanced economies. It's not on inflation, it's on growth. I think those points have been underappreciated in the inflation debate, so I hope that I hope that we can amplify those points. I'm getting interested in time. I'm going to skip this. Okay, I'll get to this in this. So now I want to speak about the report itself. And what I want to do here is actually go to the report suggestion box, the survey suggestion box. Everything you see here is pulled right out of the report. Each one of these are friendly suggestions for things we ought to do to achieve some of the goals that both Ben and Matthias talked about.